Good evening. Welcome to another episode of History Done Right. My name is Timothy Barrett, and I have the privilege of hosting this live stream every Monday. We've been going for several weeks now. I think if I'm counting correctly, we're on episode 9 tonight, and we're moving forward in history. I guess that's the way you do history, right? As you move forward in history. We're moving forward from the creation week to the events that follow some point after, specifically the fall of man, which, look, this is really everything we've talked about to this point in the actual history is critical to grasp onto in terms of understanding future history from the point we're studying. And as much as anything else we've looked at so far, the fall of man is important because we're talking about concerning descendants of Adam. We're talking about that event which becomes the causative event of the circumstance that descendants of Adam will find themselves in. And if you want to do history right, you have to bear this in mind, that there was an event that took place, and a real event, not just a story, not a fairy tale. There was an actual event that took place that forever marked man, descendants of Adam, and becomes the cause of the circumstance and the conditions under which every descendant of Adam enters into the world. And that's critical because it serves as itself serves as a causative to the choices, the actions that men will take from that point forward. So this is critical, and it can't just remain a Bible story, and it can't just remain something detached from true history, right? And somehow maybe it's just my own flawed reasoning as I was growing up, but somehow, this becomes a story separate from actual history and a story used to explain why Jesus needed to come. And sorry for the way I said that because I don't mean to minimize certainly the reason for Jesus coming. Not at all. What I mean to emphasize in that is that it becomes kind of a dividing point, such that there's this, I'll say theological thing, but I it's not that's giving it too much credit, right? But there's this explanation of why it is that on Sundays, we have these church services that um, you know, it, as I was growing up, these church services that often ended with an altar call and people coming, forward to be saved again or whatever the case is. And then it's not applied, incorporated as an actual piece of the history of mankind that's explanatory as to the condition and circumstances and a reasoning for why men pursue the course that they do in history. Hope you saw the sponsor for our live stream, Bradford Christian College. I encourage you to check them out, not just for yourself, but for others. Maybe you're a homeschooling family and you've got some children that are approaching um, the age of thinking about college. Um, from a very biased perspective, I would say it's the most well organized, academically rigorous online college there is. Okay. Full disclosure, I am completely biased in my opinion, but I would encourage you to take a look at it. Look at what is available through Bradford Christian College and really take seriously the design, the intent of Bradford Christian College, that um, students that enroll into a program have an assigned mentor who will walk with them through their program, challenge them, answer questions, assist them, ensure that they make the progress they need to through their program. It's a um, yeah, students have their own personal coach to walk them through the program. A variety of bachelor's degree, also master's in theological studies available through a program that has flexibility to it. And all of those things can be discussed as you contact Bradford Christian College and ask questions and talk to them. You can search out the flexible options that might be available to you in navigating that program. If you're in a situation where you need to be working and you want to be uh, completing a program, those things can be talked about, discussed, and arranged. So bradfordchristiancollege.com is the website. Go there, read the information there, contact them, ask questions, share the information, let others know about this option. bradfordchristiancollege.com. All right. Now, I've modified this a little bit, but I think last episode I started with, let's see if we can back out a little bit here. Okay, I started with this timeline and I modified it a little bit from what it looked like last time. So if you were, creating your own and you say, well, Mr. Barrett, that looks different. It does, but it's pretty much the same. Well, I wanted to show that everything that we had covered was in that first week. Now, so we actually started in the readings that we were going through. We started with the creation of Garden of Eden. We did, I don't recall that we read much about the first 5 days or 5.5 days of creation, but we kind of started with that Garden of Eden because we wanted to get to Adam, right? Because we're talking about the history of man, right? And I guess in a sense, the history of man begins before man, right? Because there's that whole first part of the week of creation right? So that's legitimate to study and all. I don't mean to say that. Um, but by the time we finished our last episode, we're still on the sixth day. Um, and that sixth day um, brought us to the point of not just the beginning of mankind, but also um, the divine institution of the home or the family as established by marriage. Sorry, you can probably tell I'm trying to get arc look at some information here without losing particular spots I like. And I should have planned better. I thought. So there's that makes sense. Okay, so I'm not sure where that ends up happening, but so sorry. This is so not professional, but then I'm not a professional YouTuber, so I'm allowed these opportunities to fumble around here. And now I'm looking for the table of contents in this book, but I don't find it here quickly. We'll move on, and he'll say, it's not happening. So we'll leave it the way it is. If I say it's not happening, then I keep looking. I have a obsessive complex, I'm sure. But anyway, we'll just let it go. All right, let it go. Okay, so last episode, then we end with the importance of understanding that the master builder of society, culture, you could even say a nation at this point, starting with a man, providing for him a woman, binding them in marriage to establish a home or a family, right? Um, sorry, you're probably going to see something flash through the screen here. I can't avoid it. Yeah, see that kind of, that's my digital Bible that I was bringing up there. Um, so just totally not prepared. Uh, the mandate that is given to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and then those wonderful words at the end of chapter 2 of Genesis of a man leaving his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and there'll be one flesh. One of the things we see here is that marriage as instituted, marriage, the home, the family as instituted, is to be faithful, right? Husband and wife will cleave to one another. It's to be forever. Um, and it's to be fruitful. Sorry, my fruitful looks like an L in there. Let's see if I can fix that. Faithful, forever, and fruitful. I don't know. Those three F's might go in a better order. Forever, faithful, I don't know. But I guess I did them alphabetical. Anyway, the point is, those three words should characterize certainly every Christian marriage, but prayerfully every marriage. Sadly, they don't. They should. I think they should make up a healthy part of the instruction of the rising generation that this is what marriage is. It's faithful, forever, and fruitful. All right. And so we saw that as really the absolutely necessary piece to providing culture, to providing society, right? Now, eventually here we're going to identify two other divine institutions. And my point is not to say that the divine institution of the home or the family has priority over the other two divine institutions. I don't think that's accurate. I think each of the three divine institutions that we will finally end up identifying have their own jurisdictional sphere within which they are to operate, and they're not to be invaded by the other divine institutions, and as far as usurping their authority within their proper jurisdictional sphere. But without question, there's a primacy to the divine institution of the home and the family, just in the natural order of things. That this will be the first government that children encounter. It'll be the first church that children encounter. It'll be the first economy within which the children will operate. It'll be the first classroom. Be the first of everything. First hospital they'll be in. I don't know. I mean, it's that's why it's so primary, and why as Christians, whether we think about our place within the church or Christians within the societies, let's say the political area, it should be of utmost importance to us that things that the church does, policies within the civil sphere, all are meant to support and in no way abuse the home, the family, the marriage. Okay, now I'm going to do something that could be considered controversial. I don't know. Now, I don't know how long I'll be able to keep this up, right? But I offer this not dogmatically. Okay, this is not to say that, well, okay, you have to believe that this is when it happened, or somehow you're failing or whatever. I want to offer this as just a way, a framework to kind of have a sense of the passing of time, right? I've tried to do some of that with the idea of realizing that we're in day 6, right? Now, there's a guy, he's known as Bishop Ussher, who produced a work called The Annals of the World. And if you've ever heard the date 4004 BC as when creation happened, it comes from Ussher's timeline. And so I want to use the Annals of the World just to kind of, as best we can, keep a time frame going. Again, not dogmatically, all right? Don't, I mean, there may be one date that I'll be dogmatic about as we go through history, but not dogmatically, okay? The whole point is to give ourselves some markers just to help us have a better sense of the passing of time through this history, okay? Now, I don't know. Not exactly sure how he got to this. Maybe we'll figure it out here. I think I'll go to an orange here. Orange is going to mean speculative, right? Blue is confident. Orange is speculative on our little timeline here. And I'm going to put down October 28, um, Friday. Now, Friday makes sense, right? Because day seven, seventh day, Sabbath, right? Saturday, maybe. That's what Bishop Ussher says. Now, I would love it actually if you want to fill up the comments telling me why this is all wrong. You can't pick October 28 and whatever. That's great. I mean, fill up the comments because we don't have enough comments on our live streams. So yeah, fill it up with, you know, I'm just using, I'm going to use the dates that Bishop Ussher has. Again, not dogmatically, but just as, okay, this kind of gives us a sense of time passing, right? Because I mean, it'd be pretty cool if we knew. I don't know that this is true, but just to say that, okay, so we're the now, well, we're in the end of our month of October when creation is happening. Okay, just to give a marker and get a sense of passing of time is the point, right? Now, clearly we know that the months were different. In fact, maybe sometime I'll I learned something really interesting. I don't know if it's really true, but it's really interesting. But I think that when you look at Old Testament, and again, fill in the comments here and confirm or deny what I'm about to say. But I think that when you look in the Old Testament calendar, the Hebrew calendar, I think you're going to find that they have 13 months. And so they had 28 days in each month, and then the one day that kind of moved around, we call it Easter today, or right, that one day kind of moves around. And so there would be that one month that had that day in it, right? And there might be, well, I won't get into conspiracy theory, but I don't know what's conspiracy theory anyway. Okay, so um, now what do we know, right? Well, we know that there's a day seven. So I'm going to put day seven here. And we're going to put Sabbath. Okay. Well, I guess we'll try to write it a little bit better than that. Sabbath. I should really practice this so that my writing is just really impressive on here. But anyway, day seven, the Sabbath. Now, according to Ussher, this would be October 29, our October 29. Well, our October 29 on the Julian calendar, I think is what he uses. October 29 is Saturday. Okay. All right. So that's interesting. And we know that Adam and Eve enjoyed the seventh day. Presumably, Adam did not do any dressing or keeping of the garden on that day, right? Because it would be a day of rest. Now, the next event that we want to cover, I know what anybody who's really following along with what I'm doing here, you're anticipating, well, what are we going to put down uh, for what day it was that, I mean, did Bishop Ussher really identify the day? Right. So this episode, we're looking at the fall of man. And so the question is, October 29th is a great day for Adam and Eve. No question about it. In fact, October 29th, year one, I don't know, that may, well, I was going to say that may have been the best day in the history of the earth. Um, But look, Resurrection Sunday has got to be a great day as well. Um, we know that there was a good day, a Good Friday, right? That was a good day, even though it's the day of the death of our Lord. It was a good day in the history of the earth. Resurrection Sunday is like a brand new day, though, right? It's a new creation, if you will. Um, but certainly prior to that, October 29th, year one may have been the single best day in history, right? Now, what's the date for the fall of man? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Maybe we'll find out from Bishop Ussher. But let's go to we've been using Matthew Henry to learn our history. So let's go to Matthew Henry and let's learn about this. All right. So we're in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Okay. Not sure why I said it the way I just did, 1 through 5. I don't know why I did that. But um here's what we read. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he, the serpent, said to the woman, Yea, has God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall not surely die. For God does know that in the day you eat of it, then your eyes shall be opened and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. All right. So there's the probably a very familiar story to all of us, right? There's the incident, the temptation, the deceiving. All right. I've got some thoughts. Um, but let's see what Matthew Henry says here. It is certain it was the devil that beguiled Eve. Okay. So without question, um, it's the devil that did the beguiling of Eve. The devil and the Satan and Satan is the old serpent, Revelation 12:9, a malignant spirit, by creation an angel of light and an immediate attendant upon God's throne, but by sin become an apostate from his first state and a rebel against God's crown and dignity. Okay, so I'm going to advocate for what, in my opinion, is the single greatest work of English literature, actually apart from the Bible. Um, Even while acknowledging that it does have problems, I mean, it's not maybe as theologically rigorous as it ought to be. Um, but I'm going to advocate Paradise Lost by John Milton. If you want to read in epic poetry a work that is magnificent at painting a picture, and it's just that, a picture of how this all happened. And I think there are some issues with it. Um, I don't think there are. There are some issues with it. I mean, it's not the Bible, so don't read it like it's the Bible. Okay. Read the Bible. Okay. The Bible tells the story. We've got it here. And it tells the story accurately and correctly. Okay. Paradise Lost can, I think, for the most part, appropriately fill in. And it can take what the Bible clearly and directly teaches us, and it can impact you So I'll just advocate for that. All right. You can please comment below and let me know your thoughts. But yeah, the devil, Satan, is a rebel against God's crown and dignity. Henry goes on, multitudes of the angels fell, but this that attacked our first parents was surely the prince of the devils, the ringleader in the rebellion. No sooner was he a sinner than he was a Satan. No sooner a traitor than a tempter. As one enraged against God in his glory and envious of man in his happiness. No sooner was he a sinner than he was a Satan. No sooner a traitor than a tempter. That's a great turn of phrase there. He, the Satan, knew he could not destroy man but by debauching him. Balaam could not curse Israel, but he could tempt Israel. The game, therefore, which Satan had to play was to draw our first parents to sin. That's his game. Draw our first parents to sin, and so to separate between them and their God. Thus the devil was, from the beginning, a murderer and the great mischief maker. The whole race of mankind had here, as it were, but one neck. And at that, Satan struck. The adversary and enemy is that wicked one. Now, look, this is the initial battle, the initial fight, the initial contest, the initial conflict that will set the course of history for the descendants of Adam. Why? Because look, the whole race of mankind had one neck. This is speaking about the representative nature of Adam, the first Adam. And it's brilliant that this is the way in which God ordered things. God ordered things in such a way as to say, I will create the representative of the human race. This will be Adam. And as it goes for him, that will set the circumstance, the condition for all of his descendants. But the blessing is that then God sent a second representative, a second Adam, a better Adam, Christ himself. And he would represent all those whom he would save. And therefore, his life, his obedience, his death, his burial, his resurrection, his ascension, his glorification is done as the representative of all those whom he will save. Now, as far as history done right, for the history of mankind, we need to know that at some point after the seventh day of the history of this world, I don't know when we turn to Ussher, maybe we'll find out when. But at some point after that seventh day, this event happened. And the circumstance and condition of mankind took a sudden, dramatic, and downward left turn. Okay, it was the devil in the likeness of a serpent. Whether it was only the visible shape and appearance of a serpent, as some think those were of which we read Exodus 7:12, or whether it was a real living serpent, actuated and possessed by the devil is not certain. By God's permission, it might be either. I think we'll get to this at some point, whether this episode or a later episode, but it seems to me like there's some indication that there is a physical change to the serpent in consequence of this, to the physical serpent. I think that I'm okay reading it that way because Matthew Henry said that it could be either, just some kind of a apparition or appearance of a serpent or a real living serpent. I mean, I think it's interesting that we don't read that. Not only do we not read that the woman was like, wait, what are you doing talking to me, serpent? like animals speaking. It's speculation, right? But what if we could talk to the animals? We don't, we're not told that Eve was shocked that this serpent was speaking. And in fact, contrary to that, she seems ready to carry on a conversation, right? So I don't know. The devil chose to act his part in a serpent. One, because it is a species creature that has a spotted, dappled skin and then went erect. Perhaps it was a flying serpent, which seemed to come from on high as a messenger from the upper world, one of the seraphim, for the fiery serpents were flying. So that's interesting to think about. Many a dangerous temptation comes to us in gay, fine colors that are but skin deep and seems to come from above, for Satan can seem an angel of light, right? The serpent here could well be, um, Satan's angelic form, perhaps, I suppose. Um, and so by appearance, like where today we're snakes or serpents, not all, not everybody, but I think generally speaking, people have kind of an aversion about, ooh, snake, serpent, right? There's something about them, right? That tongue that flicks out and just the look of them, and right? There's kind of a stay away sense, right? But that doesn't mean that's how Satan appeared at this moment of beguiling, right? Very pleasant appearance, maybe. And two, because it is a subtle creature, this is here taken notice of. Many instances are given of the subtlety of the serpent, both to do mischief and to secure to himself in it when it is done. We are directed to be wise as serpents, but this serpent, as actuated by the devil, was no doubt more subtle than any other, for the devil, though he has lost the sanctity, retains the sagacity or the wisdom of an angel and is wise to do evil. This is a bad phrase right here. Yes, we're told to be wise as a serpent, but not wise to do evil. Okay. He knew of more advantage by making use of the serpent than we are aware of. Observe, there is not anything by which the devil serves himself and his own interest more than by unsanctified subtlety. I don't know how well I can highlight here with how I've highlighted. I don't know what will happen, but right, that's an interesting phrase with unsanctified subtlety. Henry's suggesting that that's a tool of the devil, unsanctified subtlety. What Eve thought of this serpent, speaking to her, we are not likely to tell. when I believe she herself did not know what to think of it. At first, perhaps, she supposed it might be a good angel, and yet afterwards she might suspect something amiss. It is remarkable that the Gentile idolaters did many of them worship the devil in the shape and form of a serpent, thereby avowing their adherence to that apostate spirit and wearing his colors. Okay, so think about the impact on history now, because we're talking about history done right. Think about the impact on history. I mean, when Adam and Eve are out of the garden, they're having a family. I mean, they're going to talk at dinner time, right? Um, they're going to have kids that say, "Hey, Dad, what was it like before we came along? Have we always lived here? Did you ever live anywhere else, Dad?" He's going to tell the story. Yes, as sad as it is, right? And then this serpent showed up and started talking and told us this, and right? And the serpent was bad. Listen, kids, I'm telling you, the serpent was bad, beguiling, deceiving. Okay. And what happens? That becomes a symbol of, well, false worship, right? Idolatry. Um, and so, already just from reading it, we can see how this event, sometime after day 7 of the age of the world, is causative to things that come later. All right, the person tempted was the woman, now alone and at a distance from her husband, but near the forbidden tree. Those that would not eat the forbidden fruit must not come near the forbidden tree. Avoid it, pass not by it. Satan tempted Eve that by her he might tempt Adam. So he tempted Job by his wife and Christ by Peter. It is his policy, Satan's policy, to send temptations by unsuspected hands and theirs that have most interest in us and influence upon us. I mean, this is wise words, right? And here's another consequence of um, this first battle contest in history, right? Think about what that means in terms of relationships, right? And you don't want to have in a relationship with someone else, you don't want it to be clouded by constant suspicion. Ooh, how are you tempting me? But at the same time, you don't want to be um, ignorant of, or I don't know the right word to use, but you don't want to be um, not mindful of this truth. And because, if I have a relationship, whether, friendship, or if it's in a marriage relationship, whatever the case is, if I have a relationship with someone, I certainly don't want that person to be the unsuspecting hands of temptation against me. And so I would think that at that point, I want to be um, ever mindful of that circumstance, that if I get a sense that what they're saying, not necessarily even intentionally, right? I mean, I'm not saying that, oh, my friend really had a dark heart and now it's being revealed through this subtle temptation. I'm simply saying, um, that in my friend's own weakness, uh, lack of strength of character, that um, advice that they might give or direction that they might suggest could end up being unsuspected hands of temptation, right? And so I want to protect them from being that to me, right? And so what does that mean? That means that whatever counsel a friend is giving to me, I take seriously, because my hope, my anticipation is my friend gives me good counsel. And my care and concern for my friend is that I not let some kind of flawed counsel that could be unsuspected hands of temptation for me or for both of us to stand, right? So this becomes really critical in terms of uh, relationships. Personally, I mean, Henry here names a couple of circumstances. There are more in history, right? Caesar and Brutus, for example. Um, all right. That which the devil aimed at was to persuade Eve to eat forbidden fruit. And to do this, he took the same method that he does still. All right. So if Matthew Henry's correct in this, then this event in history, which is causative of so much of following history, becomes really significant because it also is instructive to us, right? It becomes instructive to us. Okay, yeah, Henry says here that he, the devil, took the same method that he does still. Okay. One, he questioned whether it was a sin or no to eat of this tree and whether really the fruit of it was forbidden, right? So he raises the question. Has God said, right? This is the has God said. Um, there's a logic textbook that um, one of the things it talks about is how the meaning of a statement can change based on where the emphasis is placed, right? So dad said, we aren't to steal the neighbor's lawnmower. Okay. But it's okay if you do, others do, not children of our dad, right? Dad said we're not to steal the neighbor's lawnmower, right? But it's okay to break it or misuse it or hide it or dad said we're not to steal the neighbor's lawnmower, right? But the bicycle, the power tools, that's free game, right? So, right, these are the rationalizations you could say of how we take what is really clear and we play with it, right? To give us room to do what we might otherwise like to do. Okay. So Satan questions that which God has said. Let's see what's next here. Um, That which he aimed at in the first onset was to take off her sense of the obligation of the command. Okay. Right. So once we raise that question, right now, um, or once Satan raises that question and and questioning of it is in the mind of the one being tempted, um, it's to take off the sense of the obligation of the command. Surely you are mistaken. It cannot be that God should tie you out from this tree. He would not do so unreasonable a thing. See here that it is the subtlety of Satan to blemish the reputation of the divine law as uncertain or unreasonable, and so to draw people to sin, right? So, um, look, this needs to be a part of our diligent consideration of God's word, God's divine law, right? I'm listening to a sermon. I'm hearing a pastor who uh, is seeming to suggest that there's some uncertainty or unreasonableness. Okay, well, this is falling in line with the tactic of the deceiver, the beguiler, right? I mean, think about how far within the broad spectrum of professing Christian churches, how far afield many have gone regarding certain matters, right? If you ever heard of Bodhi Bakum, I mean, I think he's the one that, at least I first remember making these statements that I think are so true. Just think about how hard contemporary churches work in making statements that would seem to be efforts to not offend homosexuals. Um, I mean, they work really hard at it. If you read documentation of churches, it's not unusual that when it comes to human sexuality, churches have these long, long, drawn out statements regarding human sexuality, and even the best of those kinds of statements, while saying that homosexuality is a sin, they make so many other comments to try to accommodate for those feelings, and it's blah 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 blah. When there's pressure, societal pressure on the church to waver on clear biblical matters, it's not a time for trying to accommodate what's happening culturally. It's a time for strengthening the church's expression regarding that matter. Statements of human sexuality should become more concise and precise and more convicting in moments like this, not longer and accommodating and, oh, we understand the difficulties of things. The statement needs to be a more clear clarion call. And that it is therefore our wisdom to keep up a firm belief of and a high respect for the command of God. Okay, well, see, I didn't need to go on, did I? I was going to just finish the sentence. This is what I do so often. If I just finish the sentence that Matthew Henry writes, it'll be made clear to. All right. Has God said, "You shall not lie, nor take his name in vain, nor be drunk," etc.? Yes, I'm sure he has, and it is well said, and by his grace I will abide by it, whatever the tempter suggests to the contrary. See, now Henry is saying, let's take this to other commands, right? I mean, you never see church statements work so hard with things like being a liar or a drunkard, typically, right? We don't work so hard as with that human sexuality question. They work so hard to be so accommodating and get really, we're going to hold the line, but we're going to do it in a way that's kind and gentle and, mushy. And essentially what they're going to do is what Henry here says not to do. We're going to do it in a way that is not a clear, firm belief of and high respect for the command of God. We're not going to do that. We're going to show a really high respect for the difficulties that you, the sinner, are wrestling with and understanding those. All right. Here observe, it was her weakness to enter into discourse with the serpent. Okay, it was her weakness. Notice what Matthew Henry says here. It was her weakness to enter into discourse with the serpent. It was her weakness to even talk to the serpent. That was her weakness. Her curiosity, and perhaps her surprise to hear a serpent speak, led her into further talk with him. Note, it is a dangerous thing to treat with a temptation which ought at first to be rejected with disdain and abhorrence. Feelings of guilt come over one upon reading this. Um, yeah, but there's a tingling to temptation, right? It incites a curiosity. I'll look a little bit. I won't really. Notice what Henry says here next. The garrison that sounds a parley is not far from being surrendered. Okay, that's military talk, right? The garrison, that place that a military is holding. Parley, let's negotiate. That's like the step towards surrender. Okay. Those that would be kept from harm must keep out of harm's way. Well, that's an interesting piece of advice right there, right? Do you want to avoid being hurt? Then don't go into the way of where hurt happens. Now, I mean, hurt, I shouldn't use that word, right? I should use, do you want to avoid sin, falling into sin? Then stay away from the ditch, right? Um, all right. It was her wisdom. Oh, this is interesting, right? So he started with her weakness. Now we're on to her wisdom. It was her wisdom to take notice of the liberty God had granted them in answer to his sly insinuation, as if God had put them into paradise only to tantalize them with the sight of fair but forbidden fruit, right? So I think we talked about this before when we talked about the Garden of Eden, read about it. Like, it's not like this was the only tree in the garden, is not right? What did God say? You may freely eat of all the trees The multitude of trees, right? I think from that picture we're to understand that every time they turned around, there was another tree with fruit, good fruit to eat, right? There was never a point where they were in the garden and all the trees are so far away, I can't get to them in time to satisfy this deep hunger, and I'm right near the forbidden tree, so all I can do is that's the only thing I can do is to eat of this tree. That's not the circumstance. Yea, says she, we may eat of the fruit of the trees. Thanks to our Maker, we have plenty and variety enough allowed us. To prevent our being uneasy at the restraints of religion, it is good often to take a view of the liberties and comforts of it, right? Yeah, what he's saying there is that so often people think, or I don't know if they really think this, their excuse of not engaging in true Christianity. Well, it's just a list of don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that. Yeah, it is. That's why the New Testament tells us what? Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has set you free. Yeah. So that's a bunch of don'ts, right? The yoke is easy, the burden is light in Christ. I mean, if you want to interpret that to say, okay, there is a yoke, there is a burden, but easy and light. Okay. It's not the ridiculous burden and heavy weight that encumbers those who insist on living in so-called freedom outside Christianity. One old time, I'll say Christian song said, hey, I've been released from that prison called freedom you choose. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like, um, you live outside of Christianity, God's divine law. You think that throwing off the law of God will give you liberty, and it casts you right into prison. And you're bound by all the licentiousness that you indulge in. Okay, so that's pretty interesting what Matthew Henry points out here. Like, right? It's like, it's not all bad here. I mean, Eve was on track at some point. She seems a little to waver about the threatening and is not so particular and faithful in the repetition of that as of the precept. God had said, in the day you eat thereof, you shall surely die. All she makes of that is, lest you die. Wavering faith and wavering resolutions give great advantage to the tempter. Okay, so let's look at the verses here. Verse 3, of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Somewhat softened from the command that God gave, you shall surely die. Now, there's also the point that she says, neither shall you touch it. And touching was not in the command, or not touching, whatever, was not in the command. Now, my own personal theory on this, and not dogmatic, but hey, I'll appreciate all the comments you want to make about this, as far as what the truth of the matter is or whatever. But my own personal theory on this is that when we read that command, Eve has not been created yet. And the command is given to Adam. it suggests to me that it was expected that Adam would instruct Eve in that command, right? That Eve, having been created, would look at Adam and say, "Wow, what are we supposed to do here? What's the rules?" And he would tell her, "Okay, see that tree right there? You're not to eat of it." And I could imagine that Adam might then add, in fact, I don't even want you to touch it. Adam may well have added that on. Um, but what Matthew Henry is pointing out, the wavering that he's pointing out is her saying, lest you die, being a softening of you shall surely die. And he calls that wavering faith. And that wavering faith gives advantage to the tempter, right? Now, let's get back to history done right, okay? Wavering faith gives advantage to the tempter, gives advantage to temptation. From this point forward, as we study through history, particularly when we're studying um, individuals in history that are um, Christians, we want to take note of those instances if we see them. Like what, why did this Christian fall in this particular sin or fall to this temptation? And can we see leading up to that a wavering faith, right? Because now in that we're really drilling into the causes and effects in history. Continuing on, he denies that there was any danger in it, insisting that though it might be the transgressing of a precept, yet it would not be the incurring of a penalty. You shall not surely die. You shall not dying die. Okay. Now, I think that that is in this little history here, that is the point at which the serpent directly contradicts the word of God, right? He started by questioning. Okay. In fact, if we scroll back up, that questioning was number one. Notice now we're at number two. He denies. He denies any danger. I mean, how does that work today? Well, I don't know. Drunkenness is sinful, right? Yeah, but a lot of people get drunk and they go on and are happy and have fun and blah, 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 right? They're not, we're not to be greedy though. Yeah, but look at how many people are greedy and they get accumulate a lot of wealth and they go on seemingly happy. And so the second of his method, denying any danger. This was a lie, a downright lie. For one, it was contrary to the word of God, which we are sure is true. Two, it was contrary to his own knowledge. When he told them there was no danger in disobedience and rebellion, he said that which he knew by willful experience to be false. He, Satan, had broken the law of his creation and had found to his cost that he could not prosper in it. And yet he tells our first parents they shall not die. He concealed his own misery that he might draw them into the like. He concealed his own misery that he might draw them into the like. Thus, he still deceives sinners into their own ruin. He still does that. Oh, right? I mean, it's like so true. You just know it's so true. It's just true. What does it say in Romans? It says a lot of things in Romans, but Romans chapter 1, as you read that downward spiral in Romans chapter 1, you're probably familiar with it. The last verse, who, knowing the judgment of God, see, Satan knew the judgment of God for rebellion, for sinfulness, right? Who, knowing the judgment of God, that they who commit such things are worthy of death. He knew you shall surely die. He knew that was true. Not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them, but have pleasure in them that do them. It's like it's like the sinner isn't getting enough satisfaction out of doing the sin themselves. They've got to get more pleasure. And so what do? They draw others into the sin. He tells them that though they sin, they shall not die, and gains credit rather than God, who tells them the wages of sin is death. Note, hope of impunity is a great support to all iniquity and impenitency in it. And okay, so that's, look, we're not going to take the time now, but that's a statement that needs to be contemplated. Okay. Hope of impunity is a great support to all iniquity and impenitency in it. I'll leave that with you to think through, and you're going to need to define some terms in there and really think about that. Okay, number 3. He promises them advantage by it. He not only would undertake that they should be no losers by it, thus binding himself to save them from harm, but if they would be such fools as to venture upon the security of one that had himself become a bankrupt, he undertakes they shall be gainers by it, unspeakable gainers. He could not have persuaded them to run the hazard of ruining themselves if he had not suggested to them a great probability of bettering themselves. Okay. Look, what Matthew Henry is saying here is that Satan says it's not just that things are not going to go bad for you if you eat of this fruit. It's that things are going to go so much better for you. He insinuates to them the great improvements they would make by eating of this fruit. Great improvements. And he suits the temptation to the pure state they were now in, proposing to them not any carnal pleasures or gratifications, but intellectual delights and satisfactions. These were the baits with which he covered his hook. Now, in all these insinuations, he aims to beget in them first discontent with their present state, as if it were not so good as it might be and should be. Note, no condition will of itself bring contentment unless the mind be brought to it. Adam was not easy, no, not in paradise, nor the angels in their first state. Secondly, ambition of preferment, as if they were fit to be gods. Satan had ruined himself by desiring to be like the Most High, and therefore seeks to infect our first parents with the same desire that he might ruin them too. Okay, that takes me back to the Romans verse, right? He insinuates to them that God had no good design upon them in forbidding them this fruit. For God does know how much it will advance you, and therefore in envy and ill will to you, he has forbidden it, as if he dares not let them eat of that tree because they would know their own strength and would not continue in an inferior state, but be able to cope with him, or as if he grudged them the honor and happiness to which their eating of that tree would prefer them. Right? These are all insinuations of how giving into this temptation is not just that the bad promised will not happen, it's that there's good that was never told to them. Thus, still, the devil draws people into his interest by suggesting to them hard thoughts of God and false hopes of benefit and advantage by sin, right? Suggesting hard thoughts of God and false hopes of benefit and advantage by sin. Let us therefore, in opposition to him, always think well of God as the best good and think ill of sin as the worst of evils. Thus, let us resist the devil and he will flee from us. All right, so that's Genesis 3, verses 1 through 5, that history of this moment of, of temptation, of beguiling of Eve. Now, in our history here, we haven't, the thing hasn't happened yet, okay? So as we're walking through this history and we're seeing this is the beguiling, the deceiving that's going on, right? I mean, we know the story, right? But if we want to follow this drama as we're reading through it here, right? There's still hope, right? I mean, think about all the possibilities that could happen here. Eve could come to her senses. She could realize, no, this isn't right. I'm not going to do this thing. In fact, I'm going to quit talking to you. You know, Eve could turn and call for Adam and say, Adam, I need help. This is help me understand what's happening here. I need your direction, your protection, right? Adam could have an awareness of what's going on and step in and protect Eve and protect the garden and you know, either one of them, both of them together could call out to their father and ask for help in this moment. Right. So there's the possibilities of if we follow the drama of this history, the possibilities are there right now as we stop at verse 5. And that's where we're going to have to stop. I've gone longer than I should have probably, but we'll pick up with this most significant event in history. Not the most significant, but a most significant event in history. We'll consider it next time. As we continue our series, History Done Right. So I appreciate you following along through the whole subscribe, like, share. We'll continue the drama here next time on History Done Right. Join us for that next week, Lord willing.